listeners, your host Gabe Howard here with a quick heads up. We recorded this live and in person while in New York City. Dr. Nicole and I were literally in the same room, which makes this episode a little special to us. And I gotta tell you, as a guy who lives with bipolar, I was nervous, but not paranoid. And this episode is going to explain the difference.
You're listening to Inside Bipolar, a Healthline Media podcast, where we tackle bipolar disorder using real-world examples and the latest research.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the podcast. My name is Gabe Howard, and I live with bipolar disorder.
And I'm Dr. Nicole Washington, a board-certified psychiatrist.
And we continue to get your emails. You can hit us up at show@psychcentral.com and tell us what you like or what you don't like or what topics you want us to cover. And frankly, it's the topics. We need more topics. We need to know what you're thinking so that we can cover it. And one of the things that y'all are thinking is that you're paranoid, because we get an awful lot of emails about bipolar and paranoia, what it is, what it isn't, how it intersects. And I got to tell you, Dr. Nicole, I thought I understood paranoia. I've experienced it myself. I've worked on it in therapy, but the more research I did, the more confused I became. So this is going to be a Dr. Nicole episode where you have to explain all of this.
Oh,
what
it's
is
all on me.
Yeah, it's all on. What's it? Really, it's always on you. It's just in the editing, it makes it look like I did more than I actually did. But we all know that you're the superstar.
Oh, well, I'm glad we got that on record.
On film?
Yeah, I'm glad that we have visual and audio. I will get a clip of that. Make sure we play it.
It's going to be your ringtone? Mm-hmm. Yeah, gotcha. So is paranoia an actual medical diagnosis? Where does that fall? Is it in the DSM-5?
Yes, it's in the DSM-5, but no, it's not. It's not a diagnosis in the sense that you can go look up the diagnosis of paranoia and there's criteria and things like that. It's mentioned, though.
Okay.
But I think to start, we have to come to an agreement about what is our definition of paranoia going to be.
Well, is there a medical definition of paranoia?
So we're going to use the definition of paranoia being suspicion of someone's acts or motives, intention. I think that's a generally agreed upon definition of paranoia. Do we feel okay with that?
I would add sort of like the rumination, right? Like you can't get it out of your head. Like you're suspicious, you're worried, and you can't move on from it. Right? Because being suspicious about somebody could be well-grounded. I am suspicious my coworker is coming after my promotion, right? But it's the obsessive part. It's the I can't sleep, I can't think about anything else. All roads lead to...
Right.
I think that's where it becomes problematic.
Okay, so for purposes of this episode, we are going to talk about paranoia as a pathologic, maladaptive thing. Something that's bad. We're going to talk about paranoia as bad juju.
Bad juju. Okay.
Bad juju.
Is that the DSM-5 definition?
That's the
Paranoia is
definition.
bad juju.
that's the when things are getting really bad. I'm like, this is bad juju, y'all. We're going to talk about paranoia in that sense. Okay. But I do think we have to talk about just this concept of paranoia as a normal, healthy thing. And so I will say for me, I always considered paranoia pathologic. I always thought paranoia was this thing that I equated with psychosis, and I thought, oh, that's what paranoia is. And then I started actually talking to people, and people throw around the word paranoia a lot. People are like, oh yeah, I'm paranoid about this, or I'm paranoid about that. And I learned early on, I cannot take my definition of paranoia and let someone tell me they're paranoid and just apply it to what they're thinking. So people will say, oh, I have paranoia. I could easily just say psychosis. Oh, this person is psychotic. And I could let that drive my entire encounter if I don't dig deeper. But if a person says to me, I'm paranoid, and I say, oh, tell me about that. And they say, oh, well, I live in the neighborhood, and one time I got robbed. And so ever since then, I'm a little paranoid when I'm walking home. I'm like, that's actually healthy for you.
Right. That's not paranoia.
Right. Like that's a good thing. That's a healthy suspicion.
Right.
You know, I'm a single woman.
Be a trauma response. Right. But,
right. Yeah. But you could also just have a healthy suspicion, and people will say I'm paranoid. That's not paranoia.
Right. We're not talking about that. I think that maybe a good way to conceptualize this, and you let me know, is I go for walks. We've talked about it on the show before. And somebody found out that I go for walks early in the morning with earbuds in. Right. I crank up my music and I'm walking.
Seems pretty unsafe to me.
Exactly. That's what my friend, who was a woman, said. You're walking around in the dark and you can't even hear if somebody's coming up behind you.
Right.
And then she said, I'm just super paranoid something bad's going to happen.
Right.
Now, in that example, That's not paranoia. That's preparation. That's a different risk tolerance level.
Right.
That's nothing that they need a Dr. Nicole for.
Right.
That's nothing that is a symptom of bipolar disorder. That is just a Gabe is okay walking with a headset. My friend does not want earbuds. Hard stop. Okay. So when does it cross over? What should I be concerned with? Because she's not paranoid. She's just a
She's
prepper.
just saying, I'm prepared. If something pops off, I'm going to be ready.
Yeah.
Got it. And that makes sense.
She wants to hear the bad guy coming.
Yes. No, absolutely.
Very reasonable.
If we think about paranoia, so we've talked about it becoming pathologic, becoming bigger than we really need it to be healthy, that's when we start looking into problems. So there's this next layer of it. So there are people who say, well, I have a history of being attacked. So I'm paranoid that I'm going to be attacked again. So I'm always watching out because I'm always paranoid that something bad's going to happen to me because something bad has happened to me or because something bad has happened to people I care about. That then becomes more of an anxiety, trauma-related kind of symptom. So that might actually not be paranoia. The word for that might actually be hypervigilance. So that might be the person who says, I was rear-ended at a red light. Now every time I stop at a red light, I'm always kind of looking in the rearview mirror because I want to make sure that I'm not getting rear-ended again or that the person who's coming up behind me, they look like they're able to stop. That's more hypervigilance than it is paranoia. But we use the same word. I mean, you see how that can be confusing because we just use paranoia to describe something totally normal and healthy. And then we also use paranoia to describe this really high level of anxiety. People who have generalized anxiety will very often describe paranoia as, I'm just always worried something bad's going to happen. Like I just always have this sense of something's going to go down. Something's not going to go right.
I think what we've established is that people use the words wrong. The English language is deeply, deeply confusing, right? For example, when I was a kid in the Michael Jackson era, I told my dad I was bad. I was bad. And my dad said, no, who told you that you are not a bad kid? He was real upset because he thought, no, Dad, Michael Jackson's bad. It means I'm awesome. I'm cool. I'm woohoo. But he didn't know that. He wasn't up on the lingo, right? So this is an example of where language caused the confusion. Right. I was saying I was awesome. He was hearing that I was self-deprecating. So he wanted to fix that in his young child. So we do this all the time where we say, I'm depressed. No, I'm sad. I'm anxious. No, you're nervous, right? So one of the hallmarks of any diagnosis is it interferes with the activities of daily living for 2 or more weeks. So it's not just, hey, I'm worried about wearing earbuds. It's that it's interfering with my life. I'm no longer exercising. I'm no longer leaving my house. So in order to become like, quote unquote, full-blown medical paranoia, something that you need a Dr. Nicole for, it has to be harming you in some way. Is that a fair way to state that? If it's not harming you, if it's just causing little quirks or, you still go for the walk, you just don't wear the earbuds, for example, so that you can hear people coming up on you, no harm, no foul.
So first of all, 2 weeks, a major depressive episode, every diagnosis is going to have its own time frame. So they're not all 2 weeks. Each thing is going to have its own time frame in the DSM. That's why you see somebody, they'll keep up with the time frames and how long it's been and all of that. Paranoia may be defined differently medically versus Merriam-Webster. The dictionary definition of paranoia might absolutely fit what your friend is having. But our definition and kind of how we conceptualize paranoia might not be in that same way.
And R being the medical
Our
definition,
being the
psychiatric. Yeah, right, okay.
The way the medical community sees paranoia may be a very different thing. So I have to make sure we're speaking the same language, or I at least have to ask a follow-up question to figure out, okay, but what do you mean when you say paranoia? Like I have to do when I say, tell me, have you ever had a depression episode? And people will say, yes, I'm depressed all the time, or I have depression episodes that last 2-3 days, and then I won't have one for a really long time. I'm like, hold on, because we need to be on the same page. Are you having a depression episode, or are you having a normal response to a big stressor, or what's going on? So I think we have to start there, point blank, period. Have to start there. Like we have to be able to figure out what is the basis of this paranoia. Because if it's anxiety, PTSD, like what is this? But you could also be psychotic.
Okay, so the paranoia versus psychosis, because I believe that the paranoia that has caused me the most problems had to do when I was experiencing psychosis. And what I mean by that is I was patrolling the house. I thought that the window washers in the office building that I was working in were sent there to watch me. Right. So I was very paranoid that people were watching me and that at any time they were getting ready to invade my home, my personal space, and hurt my loved ones. And this drove me one day in the cold, barefoot, in shorts and a t-shirt, to patrol the perimeter of my home to keep my wife safe, which of course was extraordinarily disturbing for her when she came home from work and saw me walking the perimeter. So all of that, anybody can hear, okay, dude's out of his mind. That is, things are not going well for Gabe. Okay, but here's where I get confused. Was I paranoid, or was I just experiencing psychosis? Or is there some sort of hybrid of both?
So let's break those down a little bit. So you can have paranoia that reaches a delusional level, and we have persecutory delusions, which is a category of delusion, right? Persecutory, you think somebody's coming after you, going to harm you, has malintent towards you. Persecutory delusion, your paranoia was a persecutory delusion.
Mine personally was a persecutor. So I wasn't paranoid. I was having a persecutor.
Or remember, we called them paranoid delusions. We called them paranoid delusions.
Yeah, that's how I've heard it.
It's the same thing. Like we've called them paranoid delusions. It's the same kind of category. We just are calling them different things. I mean, remember, before we got to the DSM-5, our schizophrenia diagnoses were broken into types, and there was a paranoid schizophrenia, which you didn't even really have to have had paranoia to have. So we have always thought of paranoia as a part of psychosis. We've always kind of thought of it that way. We have on the medical side. I think that we just are being very loose with the way that we are using the word, and it's muddying up the waters. It's the same way that people always tell me, oh, I was manic yesterday. Or I woke up manic this morning, and I'm talking to them and interacting, and I'm like, you're not manic.
They're just excited.
We need to talk about what mania really is,
right,
to help us speak the same language. So we have our paranoia that we're saying has now moved into a pathologic level, and also now has moved into a delusional level. So delusions are part of the psychosis umbrella. So when we talk about psychosis, delusions are part of that. Hallucinations are part of that. Disorganized behavior and speech is part of that. So those are all under the umbrella of psychosis. Psychosis is not just hallucinations and hearing voices and seeing stuff and feeling stuff on your body and things like that. It's not just that. What's a delusion?
Yeah, that's a good question.
What's a delusion?
I thought I knew, but then
what's a delusion?
Yeah, now I'm lost.
Well, by definition, a delusion, Gabe, is a fixed false belief, despite there being evidence to the contrary.
Like I thought that people were stalking me because they cared, but the window washers were just washing the windows.
Right.
Gotcha.
But you believed it.
I did. I believed it with all my heart.
To be true.
Yes.
Nobody could convince you otherwise.
And people tried.
And they probably made pretty compelling arguments, but in your delusional state, you just weren't able to see it because your reality in that moment was completely different than everybody else's reality. In that moment, your reality is that you were not safe and you needed to protect your family. And that was what you did. That is why you were walking around the perimeter, because you needed to make sure they weren't going to put one over on you and they weren't going to do something negative to you or people you loved. That was the whole thing.
Right, and it compounds because anybody who took the side of, Gabe, nobody's watching you, was clearly converted and recruited to the cause. So they became part of the people who were hurting me. They were joined. And this became very problematic when I was like, they got to my wife. Because now she's in on it. So the very person that I'm protecting is now my enemy. So it becomes very convoluted quickly. But I think where I'm getting a little confused, and just to make sure we back up a little bit for the listeners, it sounds like most people would say, hey, my loved one is paranoid. But in actuality, their loved one is having a delusion that consists of paranoia. And this might be where the confusion comes in the community.
I would like you to think about it, Gabe, in terms of the person who calls, who has a loved one with bipolar disorder, who is having actual paranoia in the pathologic sense that we're thinking about it as just not finishing the sentence. So they say my loved one has paranoia. To me, likely they're saying my loved one has paranoid delusions. They just don't know that wording to use.
Gotcha.
But if a person, in your instance, a person living with bipolar disorder who is experiencing what you were experiencing, I would say that's a paranoid delusion. So that is both paranoia and a delusion, because paranoia can be a delusion.
So I'm picking up what you're putting down there, and I think our listeners are as well.
Right.
But anybody who's tuned into this episode, they're in harm's way. Something's going wrong. They're refusing to go to work. They're refusing to see their doctors. They're cutting off family members. Mm-hmm. They are paranoid, whether it's a paranoid delusion or psychosis or whatever. Something is preventing them from living their best life, from thriving, and from getting better. And everybody around them is like, they are so paranoid they won't do X. What's the treatment for that? When this gets in front of you, Dr. Nicole, is there an anti-paranoia medicine?
No, there's not a specific anti-paranoia medicine. But the first question has to be, are they safe? First question. Before we start talking about what can we do to help, is this individual safe?
So in my case, I was not safe, and I bought myself a trip to the emergency room.
And
I'm assuming that's where that's going.
If you're not safe, because I need to know, what is your paranoia going to drive you to do? So if a person sits in front of me and I figure out, okay, this person is psychotic, so they are experiencing psychosis, big old umbrella. Under psychosis, there's smaller umbrellas of things. They're in the delusion category. And if we have to describe the delusion and break it down even further, they're having persecutory or paranoid delusions, right? So this is where this happens. If they're at that point, then I have to figure out, what is it going to drive you to do? So if you said, well, yeah, I don't trust those window people, I'm going to pace the perimeter of this home until they're gone. Okay, if they're going to be gone at 3 o'clock and you want to pace till 3, I'm not going to put you in the hospital for pacing till 3. Right, it's a win-win. You're going to get your steps in. I'm not going to have to put you in the hospital.
It's concerning, but not immediate.
It's concerning, but not immediate. If your paranoia is, well, I'm going to defend my family as much as I have to, and I'm going to make sure that I take this into my own hands because I don't trust the law, and I'm going to make sure that my wife is protected by any means necessary. And you're like, whoa, what does that mean? What are we thinking? Then I'm worried about the safety of other people. I'm worried about you doing something you could later regret. But you could be in that gray zone where you say, I'm so angry. And I go, well, what's that going to lead you to do? And you say, well, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to call the police and let them take care of it. That's that gray. Like, does he need the hospital? Does he not need the hospital? Do I think he's going to try to hurt these people? What's his past look like? Has he ever hurt people in a state like this? Has a previous state ever gotten him to that point? It's based on a lot of things, but I have to figure out your safety first and foremost.
So for the purposes of the rest of the conversation, let's assume that the person does not need immediate medical attention. Because once that happens, they're inpatient, and that's a whole other quagmire. And unfortunately, there's just not a lot that the patient can really do once you're inpatient. Yes. And loved ones even play a lesser role because the person is hospitalized at that time.
Yes.
So let's talk about where loved ones and people like me, people living with bipolar disorder, can really be most impactful. And that's when you determine, okay, there's definitely something wrong, but you're staying home. What can we do? How do we start getting better?
I did say that there was not a medication specifically for paranoia, but we have entire categories of medications for psychosis, the antipsychotics. Those are the medications that we would very likely use. So let's take another step to the side and think about a person with bipolar disorder is only going to experience psychosis typically in the midst of an episode. They're going to have psychosis either during a manic episode or during a depression episode. So I really have to figure out what's the episode that is predominating, that is causing the psychosis, and then I can treat that particular episode and deal with that particular episode. So I might use antipsychotic medications to be more of a quicker fix. I might use mood stabilizers because I just want to get you out of the mania, out of the depression, to see if that helps with the paranoia, especially if you're not in a space where you're dangerous and I need to put you into the hospital.
You've mentioned that paranoia happens with a mood episode. Can it be both manic and depression mood episodes?
You can absolutely have psychosis with mania. You can also have psychosis with depression. Usually, if you're going to experience psychosis, whether that's hallucinations, whether that's paranoia or other delusions, it's going to happen in more severe forms of those mood states. So you may not experience any kind of psychosis during a milder manic episode or during a milder to moderate depression episode. But if we get to the more severe ends of either of them, that's when you might experience those psychotic symptoms. And the psychosis usually goes along with the mood episode. So your psychosis that you experience when you're more depressed is going to be more doom and gloom and consistent with being depressed. And the kind of psychosis that you experience in a mania is going to be more, woo, hey, it's going to be more expansive because your mood is more expansive.
Does time help with this? If you do nothing, will it go away?
So, in the sense that if you do nothing for a manic episode, eventually it will go away. If you do nothing for a depression episode, eventually it will go away. But they can also be long-standing if we do nothing. So yes, could it go away? If you're somebody whose manic episodes that come with psychosis are pretty self-limited and they always end up shifting the course, yeah, I guess it could go away. But typically it's going to go away with time and medication.
So it sounds like when somebody's experiencing paranoia, you're not treating the paranoia, you're treating the thing that's driving the paranoia. So you're treating psychosis, you're treating mania, you're treating delusions.
So we've said paranoia is a delusion is psychosis. So they're all the same thing.
They're literally all the same word?
Thing. Paranoia is
this like
delusion.
Soda and pop? Is it? Is like soda and pop is exactly the same thing. H2O and water, exactly the same thing, right? OJ and orange juice, exactly the same thing. Is it literally like that? Are all three of these things literally the same thing, just different words?
I think it's more of the difference between like sparkling water is a carbonated beverage, soda is a carbonated beverage, but they're all carbonated beverages. So psychosis is the overarching carbonated beverage, and under it you have different types, and you have sodas and you have sparkling water under the umbrella, right? So it's overarching. They're all carbonated beverages.
Gotcha. So it's like Coke and Pepsi are both colas. Cola is the paranoia. Coke and Pepsi are the flavors of the paranoia.
Whew, you are making this way more complicated than it needs to be.
I don't understand it at all.
Gabe, you are making this way, 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 way too complicated. Okay? Paranoia that begins to be disruptive and is more than just a healthy suspicion and is more than just paranoia because I'm anxious. Remember those other words we use, hypervigilance and anxiety. Paranoia that really starts to interfere with your functioning and becomes more severe is a delusion. And a delusion is a psychotic symptom. So you can say paranoia is a delusion, or you can say paranoia is psychotic. Both of those things are accurate.
Gotcha. I think where I was getting hung up is I kept thinking that paranoia was its own unique thing, like it existed alone. Right, like going back to the soda analogy, soda is its own unique thing versus pizza, but they're much more interconnected.
Yes, because
Gotcha.
They are much more the same thing than I think that you are able to conceptualize in your brain. But I do think this happens for a lot of people who live with bipolar disorder because people, by and large, do not know about their illness and don't really know the words, because we really have done a really horrible job of kind of socializing people to the illness. It seems like when someone is diagnosed with bipolar disorder, they should get a welcome pamphlet to welcome to living with bipolar disorder.
Oh, we get a pamphlet already. Yeah. We get the pamphlet. This is not helpful.
They should get a welcome to bipolar disorder book, and they should be able to learn all these things in it, but that doesn't happen. And so they don't know, because people every day tell me things like, oh, my diagnoses are bipolar disorder and major depressive disorder. And I say, okay, let's stop, because I want you to have the right words. I want you to talk the talk when you're talking to people other than me. I need you to know you don't have both, right? You don't have bipolar disorder and schizophrenia because you get paranoid when you're manic. That's not what that means. I want you to have the words. So the words are, I have bipolar disorder, and when my episodes are more severe, I have psychosis. I have psychotic features. And they may say, well, what kind of psychosis do you experience? Do you have hallucinations? And you say, no, I have paranoid delusions. And I start to believe that people are out to get me, and I start to believe that people are going to harm me in some way. That is how we can speak the same language and given the same information.
I think one of the things that makes this very complicated is that people think that they understand paranoia. Even in my own research for this episode, I was really surprised the number of people who are not talking to their Dr. Nicole's about their paranoid issues. They believe very strongly that people are out to get them, that people are hurting them. And they're just like, well, that's just my paranoia. I need to talk about bipolar disorder. And I have learned in this moment that, no, that's not your paranoia. That's your delusion. That's all of these other things, and it all fits together. So I think that people think that it's separate. It sounds like it is not separate at all.
No, it is a paranoid delusion.
Right.
It is one thing. It is a paranoid delusion. That's what we're going to call it, a paranoid delusion every time we say it from here on.
From here on out.
So we're going to call it a paranoid delusion. That is what we're going to call it. But you bring up a really good point, because if you don't tell your Dr. Nicole, because if you have bipolar disorder and you have psychosis, by definition, it's happening in one of those mood episodes. If you start having those things happen to you outside of a mood episode, your mood is in the middle, you're not manic, you're not depressed, but you're still having this pretty intense paranoid delusion happening, you may not have bipolar disorder. You may have schizoaffective disorder. And we missed it because you didn't tell us about the paranoid delusions that you were having every day, day to day. And you didn't have loved ones who were coming in and tattling on you, because that's really when I find out. It's the spouses.
I think a bigger issue, Dr. Nicole, it's not that they're not reporting it, it's that they don't see it as a symptom of bipolar disorder. In fact, I don't think the average person with bipolar disorder sees it as an issue at all, because to them it's asked and answered. To me, there was nothing to report. I believe that the window washers and all of these people were watching me. Okay, that was a fact. There's nothing to report there. That's a fact.
So where I might hear about it, Gabe, is in a visit. So I might say, hey, Gabe, how's stuff at home? How's work? And you say, oh, yeah, I've been dealing with something with these window washers at work. And I'm going to say, oh, window washers, what's going on there? And you're like, oh, I mean, it's nothing. I don't trust those guys. I don't know. And you might give me a just tiny little glimpse. And in that case, I'm like a mouse. You know how they say, like, if a mouse can put his little finger under it, the whole body can get through. If you give me 1 inch of opening into your delusion, I'm in there. I am in that. I'm like, oh, we could go talk about this. And I will ask questions, and I will finally get down to, oh, like, this is a big deal. But it doesn't always come out. And that is how I have diagnosed people from bipolar disorder to a diagnosis like schizoaffective disorder, because I find out, oh, you're psychotic all the time. You just can hide it better. You can hide it so much better when you're not manic. And your brain is all over the place. And I just didn't know it until you gave me that little opening, or your spouse said, hey, he does this weird thing where he does blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, tell me about that. It's not until I get that little opening sometimes that I know that.
Okay, but I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. It does sound like you're saying that little things do matter. People like me, people who live with bipolar disorder, we get a very short amount of time with our Dr. Nicole's. Yeah. We get a very short amount of time with our psychiatrist. And you're saying, hey, this work drama, which is all I thought it was. I just thought it was work drama. I live with bipolar disorder. This is a serious and persistent mental illness. I was locked up in a psychiatric ward because of this, and you wanted me to go in my 15-minute appointment, which is actually only like 11 minutes, right? And you want me to tell them that I'm having a problem at work where they sent the window washer. I need to treat my serious and persistent mental illness. I don't have time to tell you about corporate drama. Right. But it sounds like you're saying that no, you should in fact report that stuff. Where's the balance there?
You can't tell me everything. I can't know everything. Like you said, we have a very finite amount of time together, and depending on where you're receiving services, it may be every 3 months that you get that very finite amount of time. So you aren't going to tell me about the time somebody cut you off in a grocery store line and you got upset. Like, you aren't going to tell me all those things. And you may not tell me because, remember, a delusion is a fixed false belief. You believe that this is really happening. So you're not going to tell me things that are really happening. You would tell me if you heard voices and you're like, hey, let me tell you something. I was sitting here and somebody would call my name and nobody was in the room. It scared the crap out of me. You might tell me that, but you may not even think to tell me about the delusion because a delusion is a fixed false belief. So to your reality, it's real. It's a real thing that's happening. It's just a normal, I got some work stuff. You may not tell me. It may not always come out. So this would be more so for the loved ones who are out there. I have conditioned my patients, most of them, but especially the ones who live with bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. If they're seeing me alone, I say, hey, before you see me every visit, just ask the person you live with, the person you're closest to, just ask them how they think you've been doing. And if there's anything they want you to share with me. Because that's usually where I'm going to get that information from. I mean, one of the things we teach medical students about eliciting delusions from a patient when you're interviewing a patient. If I just say, hey, Gabe, you been having any delusions? You been having any fixed false beliefs that you believe are real that nobody else believes? That's not going to get me very far. If I say, you're delusional, what are you going to say? No. So we teach them to use the people around them. So one of the questions I might ask to see if a person is experiencing delusions, I might say, are you sharing any thoughts or beliefs with people around you that you're close to and they don't agree with you, or they kind of poo-poo you, or they think they sound crazy or anything like that? And that's when I can get, my wife thinks it's crazy that I'm staying an hour in the parking lot after work, making sure those window washers are leaving and not following me home. And you're like, oh, tell me about that. Or, my wife thinks that it doesn't make sense that I'm, checking the bank account and going to the bank in person to check the account every day because I don't trust the computers because, you just never know who's on those things watching what you're doing. I get that kind of stuff. So it may not be that a person's going to outright tell me a delusional thing, and it could very well go unchecked. So loved ones, if you think your loved one is doing something odd or quirky or a little bit off the beaten path that you think their psychiatrist needs to know about, just tell them before the visit. Just say, hey, will you just ask her about this? Or will you just mention this to her or him so I can have peace of mind? Like, will you just ask them for me? That might be what gets us on the road to figuring out what's going on.
As a person who lives with bipolar disorder, I love the way you framed that. Ask your loved one what's wrong and report it because you're still in control. And that's very important to me. And I imagine it's very important to our listeners because so often this advice is, oh, do you have a crazy loved one? Well, you can send an email. You can leave a voicemail. You can demand they sign a thing. You can get them committed and then they have to talk to you. And that's what I see all the advice being. So I really want to stress to all the people living with bipolar disorder right now, Dr. Nicole has given you a gift. She's telling you that you are still in control, but you are honoring the data that you have collected from your loved ones. But you're still the coach. You're still the lead. I don't think we should squander that. Don't
squander it, but also believe you and me, I am still a fan of the email, voice message, hey, he's coming in today and he's been doing this and I told him to tell you and he has not told you, but I think you need to know. Like, I'm still a fan, but I do think the first line should be you and your support team having that kind of relationship to where you take what they say and you bring it in with you.
Dr. Nicole, we're almost out of time, but I want to end on specific advice for the loved ones. What can they do to support their loved one who has a lot of paranoia, delusions, psychosis? Is there any do's and don'ts? What advice do you have for them to support their loved one during this time?
Mm-hmm. The biggest thing I would say, especially in the acute phase, so in the early phase, that it's new, it's strong, it's intense, don't argue with your loved one. I think the worst thing someone could have done for you during that time would have been to yell at you and say, Gabe, this is ridiculous. Like, the window washers don't care about you. They don't care about me. This is crazy. You need to cut it out and stop it. Arguing never works. Telling people they're wrong, because remember, they believe that this is reality. And that's a really hard point, I think, for loved ones to get a grip on. It's hard for someone who's never been psychotic to understand what that would look like. So one of the ways, Gabe, that I will get family members to just even try to understand what this might feel like is if you're someone who pays your mortgage monthly, you pay it online, you never have to think about it, and then all of a sudden they tell you there's something wrong with the online payment system, you have to actually bring a cashier's check to the company like we're back in the 80s or something. I don't know. And you go to the bank and you say, I'd like to withdraw this amount, like a cashier's check for this amount. And they say, oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. First Name, Last Name. You actually don't have that much money in the bank. You only have $100. And you're like, no, I just got paid. Like, I paid my mortgage first of the month. Like, my rent's due. And I'm like, I'm sorry, we don't have a record of you here at all. Okay, so your fact is that you absolutely have an account there. And your fact is that you have enough to cover your mortgage because you just got paid. And the bank's fact is you have an account here, but you only have $100 in your account. Both of you are functioning in a fact that is very different. And I don't know about you, but if I go to the bank to pull out my mortgage payment and they tell me I have less than $100 in an account that I know has thousands of dollars to cover my mortgage, I am turning the bank out. Like, I am about to act a fool. The police are going to be called. Something is happening because I am really going to act a fool. This is your loved one with their psychosis, their delusional thought. Their reality is, this is what's happening to me. I don't care what y'all say. This is what's happening to me. And that is why the behaviors get so escalated, because a lot of times it's that nobody else believes that this is what's happening to me. And like, this is my reality. So they are turning the spot out, just like I would be in the bank if I showed up and they said, no, you don't have the money to cover your mortgage. You have to know how intense and isolating and frustrating something like that could feel. So arguing is never the answer. Telling them they're wrong is never the answer. Listening is the answer. Listening to what it is that they're saying. Really trying to understand, why are they so upset? What is happening? And try to put yourself in the shoes of, if I really believed that was a true thing, how would that make me feel? What if that really was true? Wouldn't you feel the same way they feel? So the answer is to figure out how to get them feeling better, not to challenge them. And that's really hard when the delusion is about you, like as a loved one. When the person's delusion is, you're not my real mom, you stole me from somebody and I'm not even your kid, you adopted me and you've been lying to me all these years. I mean, as a mom, I want to go pull out a birth certificate and go, look right here, look. I want to show pictures and video from the delivery. I'm like, look, that's you. You see what's coming, that's you. I want to show you that it's not true, but that's not the answer.
Dr. Nicole, thanks for hanging out with me today. I loved being in New York, our second live episode. I hope that we get to do this again.
Maybe.
If
you're nice to me over the next 6 months, if you're nice to me, I'll consider dragging myself back to New York City because it's such a task.
I love that. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. We need a few favors from you. First, wherever you downloaded this episode, please follow or subscribe because you don't want to miss a thing and it is absolutely free. And second, share the episode. We don't have an advertising budget. We are counting on you. Share this in a support group. Share it on a Reddit thread. Share your favorite episodes in social media. Sharing the show with the people you know is how we're going to grow. My name is Gabe Howard, and I wrote the book Mental Illness is an Asshole and Other Observations. Now, you can buy that on Amazon, but you don't want to go there. You want to go to my website and get a signed copy online with some free swag, and that website is gabehoward.com.
And I'm Dr. Nicole Washington. You can follow me on all social media platforms at Dr. Nicole Psych to see all the things I have my hand in at any given moment.
All right, and we'll see you next time on Inside Bipolar.
You've been listening to Inside Bipolar from Healthline Media and PsychCentral.com. Have feedback for the show? Email us at show@psychcentral.com. Previous episodes can be found at psychcentral.com/IBP or on your favorite podcast player. Thank you for listening.